Welcome back, explorers, to Whoosh Tales, the home of the most extraordinary kids' adventure stories anywhere on the internet, where every single week we bring you a brand new English story for children that goes deeper and means more than the one before it. This is episode 11, and if you watched episode 10, you will know that everything has changed in the Walker household. The truth about their grandfather has been told. The full shape of what he gave and why he gave it has finally settled into the hearts of Finn, Caleb, Nora, and old Thomas. And the original compass in Finn's pocket has rotated cleanly through 90 degrees and now points straight downward, toward the absolute core of the world, toward the chamber where their grandfather has been quietly keeping a trapped creature company in the dark for 10 years through the slowly fading device he built with his own hands in the last 3 years of his life. The time has come to finish what he started. This episode is a journey down, and the journey down is going to ask things of these two 10-year-old brothers that no previous adventure has asked of either of them. They spent the morning preparing, not in the dramatic way that journeys and stories are usually prepared for. No great packing of swords and provisions and rolled maps. Their preparation was quieter and more careful than that, because the descent they were about to make was not the kind that swords or provisions could help with. Caleb spent 2 hours sitting on the back step of the cottage, practicing his hold. Anya had taught him the basics of pulling his inner light to a steady center and holding it there, and now he sat with his eyes closed and his hands folded in his lap and worked at it, drawing the soft amber gold glow inward until it concentrated behind his sternum into a single warm, steady point, then expanding it back out across his whole skin, then pulling it in again, working the muscle of the gift the way another child might work a piano scale. By the end of the 2 hours, he could hold any chosen brightness for any chosen length of time, and could even release short, controlled pulses of light from his palms outward into morning air, where they glowed briefly like the slow, careful breath that contains sun before fading. Finn watched him practice and was deeply impressed and slightly intimidated, which was a new emotion for him in relation to his brother, and which he found he did not mind at all. Caleb was who Caleb was. Finn was who Finn was. They were heading into a place where they were going to need both. Nora was not coming with them. They had discussed it carefully the previous evening, and she had been the first to say it. Some descents are made by the people whose specific names are carved into the doors. She had said it gently and without any visible hurt, because she had genuinely thought about it from every angle and had reached the conclusion cleanly. She would stay at the cottage with old Thomas. She would keep watch on the surface. She would be the steady, warm, familiar, known place that her brothers would come home to. That was important. That was a job, too. Finn had hugged her tightly that morning and had not let her go for longer than he usually would, and Nora had let him not let her go for as long as he needed, which was one of the small ways that Nora had been a perfect older sister to him for all 10 years of his life. Old Thomas walked them up to the cliff face on Graymore Mountain that afternoon. He came with them in a slow, deliberate way, his wooden staff tapping against the stones of the mountain path, his eyes thoughtful but calm. When they reached the granite ledge where the door in the cliff face had opened on Finn's first visit, the old man stopped. He turned to face the two boys. He looked at them for a long moment with the particular weight of someone who is sending people he loves into a place he cannot follow them into. Then he said, "Simply, you are ready. I know it because I have watched you become ready. I know it because the mountain has watched you become ready, and the mountain is not going to send you down if you are not." He paused. "But I want you to remember 3 things while you are down there. First, you are not alone. Your brother is with you. And through your brother, every person who has loved either of you is with you too. Second, the chamber will be dark for a part of the journey. That is on purpose. The mountain does not light its deepest places artificially. Caleb's light is your light. Trust it. Trust him. Third, and this is the one I most need you to hear, boys, when you finally reach the chamber, whatever you find there will likely not be what you expect. Even I did not know exactly what your grandfather has been keeping company with for 10 years. The mountain showed him. The mountain did not show me. So go down with your hearts open and your assumptions ready to be set aside. You will need that openness more than anything else you carry with you." He pressed his hand briefly against the smooth granite of the cliff face and bowed his head once toward a mountain in something that was clearly both a request and a gratitude. Then he stepped back. Finn pressed the compass into the depression in the rock. The door opened the way it always opened now, easily and warmly, recognizing them. Amber stayed outside this time. There were sections of the deep descent that even she would not be able to fit through, they all knew, and she settled herself patiently on the granite ledge beside old Thomas and watched the two boys walk into the warm amber-lit passage with the particular focused attention of a dragon who has decided not to flinch for as many hours as it takes them to come back out. Finn and Caleb walked the long, curving passage to the chamber of amber columns together in silence. They had walked it before, Finn alone the first time, Finn with Caleb on the second, but this time it felt different. The mountain was paying closer attention. The deep, slow heartbeat of the geological pulse beneath the smooth stone floor was steadier and stronger. The way a person's heartbeat steadies and strengthens when they are watching something important happen and are giving it their full focus. The amber columns in the chamber were brighter when they entered. The presence at the center of the chamber, the mountain itself condensed into recognition, greeted them both with a single wordless complete thought of acknowledgement and respect. Caleb placed his palm briefly against the polished stone floor in return. Then they walked across the chamber to the small round wooden door that had Caleb's room behind it, and beside that door in the far wall, a second door had appeared, smaller, narrower, plain dark with no name carved above its iron latch. It had not been there on either Finn's previous visits. The mountain had not yet been ready to show it. Now it was. Finn pressed a latch. The door opened inward onto a steep passage that descended sharply into the rock below the chamber. The walls of this passage were not the warm amber-glowing rock of the chambers above. They were a darker stone, cooler to the touch, the color of slate and shadowed iron. The light in the passage was dimmer too, the warm mineral glow fading the further they went down, until perhaps 100 meters into the descent Finn realized that the light around them was no longer the rocks. It was Caleb's. His brother's skin had begun glowing softly when Finn had stopped being able to see clearly, and the gentle amber gold of his held sunlight was now the only light illuminating the passage as they descended deeper. Caleb did this without being asked and without making any sort of announcement of it. He simply released his light when light was needed. That, Finn thought, was the kind of brother he had been given, the kind who notices and acts without ever needing to be told. They descended for a long time. The passage went down and down. It curved. It straightened. It narrowed in places where they had to walk single file, and widened in others where the walls drew back into chambers neither of them had time to explore. The air grew warmer the deeper they went, but warmer in a strange way, not the warmth of fire or sunlight, but the deep geological warmth of being close to the slow, patient heat at the center of a planet. Finn could taste it on his tongue when he breathed. Mineral and old. The flavor of a place that had not seen any other kind of warmth than this for billions of years. About a third of the way down, the mountain whispered to them. Caleb noticed it first. He stopped walking and put his hand against the dark stone wall and tilted his head slightly to one side. "Listen," he said. Finn stopped and listened. At first he heard nothing, just the soft, regular drip of mineral water, somewhere distant, and the faint, slow pulse of the geological heartbeat that he had become so used to that he barely noticed it anymore. Then he heard what Caleb had heard. Voices, not human voices, not voices of anything alive in the way he was used to thinking of alive. The voices of the rock itself, low and slow and patient, layered with each other, speaking in a language that was not quite language but contained intent. And the intent was a warning, not a hostile warning, a careful one. The rock was telling them that the descent below this point was going to ask things of them. It was telling them what to watch out for. It was telling them, with the particular kindness of an old friend who has known you longer than you have known yourself, that they could turn back, and that no one would think the less of them for it. They listened to the whisper for a long time. When it finished, Caleb looked at Finn, and Finn looked at Caleb, and neither of them needed to say anything. They continued downward. About halfway down, the passage opened into a small natural chamber, where a thin underground river ran across the stone floor. The river was warm. Finn tested it cautiously with one fingertip, and lit faintly from within by the same kind of light that filled the underwater city below the ocean, the sourceless, living glow of water that had been quietly purifying itself in the deep for an extremely long time. They knelt beside it and drank from cupped hands. The water tasted of mineral and something faintly sweet underneath, and it filled them with particular slow, steady restoration that water from the heart of the world provides to those who are lucky enough to drink it. They rested for a few minutes beside the river. Caleb pulled his light inward to conserve it. Sitting in the dim, natural luminescence of the chamber, the soft glow of his closed-down skin barely visible. They did not speak. There was nothing that needed saying. They were both inside the same long, careful descent, and they both understood it. About 2/3 of the way down, the passage forked. This was the moment old Thomas had warned them about most carefully. The mountain had not shown him this fork. He had not been able to tell them which path to take. They stood at the divide and looked at both options. One path led downward more steeply, but appeared smoother and easier to walk, and the other led downward more gradually, but appeared narrower and more difficult, the walls closing into a passage where they would have to crouch slightly to continue. Finn took out his grandfather's compass. The needle pointed directly between the two paths. It was not choosing for them. It was telling them, with the particular eloquence of an old instrument that knows when to step back, that this decision was theirs. They sat down at the fork. They drank a little more water from a small flask Caleb had filled at the underground river. They talked about it quietly. Caleb said, "The smooth one feels wrong." Finn said, "You mean in a real sense or in a feeling sense?" Caleb thought about it carefully. "A real sense," he said. "The smooth one is too easy. The mountain does not make things too easy on purpose. If one of these paths was the right one without any cost, there would not be a fork. There would just be that path." Finn looked at him. "You are reasoning like our grandfather," he said. Caleb half smiled. "I think I am beginning to understand him," he said. Finn put his hand on his brother's shoulder. "The narrow one," he said. Caleb nodded. They took the narrow one. The narrow path was not just narrower. It became more difficult in other ways, too. The air grew thinner and warmer. The passage began to spiral, and the spiral grew tighter as they descended, until they were turning around themselves every few meters in a slow corkscrew that made Finn slightly dizzy when he tried to look behind him. The walls in places were rough in a way that snagged at their clothing. Caleb's light, held carefully steady at a low brightness to conserve it, illuminated the passage in a small bubble of warm amber that traveled with them and showed them perhaps 3 or 4 meters ahead at any given time. They walked slowly. They paid attention. They did not hurry. About 3/4 of the way down, the test came. It came as a presence rather than as a creature. They turned a particularly tight bend in the spiral and emerged into a small alcove where the walls of the passage drew back slightly, and the air grew cold for the first time since they had begun descending. In the center of the alcove, hovering at about the height of their faces, was something that looked at first like a small dark shape suspended in the air, and then, as Caleb raised the brightness of his light, like a small dense cloud of pure absence. It was not solid. It was not moving. It was simply there, in the air, occupying the space the way silence occupies a quiet room. It made no sound. It made no movement. But Finn understood immediately, in the way you understand certain things without being told, that this was a presence that did not want them to continue, that had been here in this alcove since long before their grandfather passed through it 10 years ago, that had let their grandfather through because their grandfather had been alone and old and going to a known good purpose. And that was now considering whether to let 2 10-year-old boys through to the same destination. Caleb whispered, very quietly, "What is it?" Finn whispered back, "I do not know." They stood very still. The presence hovered. Then a sense arrived in both their minds at once. Not word exactly, not an image, but question. A clear, careful question without any malice or threat behind it, but with absolute genuine weight. The question was, "Why are you going down there?" Finn understood that this was a test. Not a test of strength or skill or magic. A test of intention. The presence was a guardian, placed in this passage perhaps by the mountain itself, perhaps by something even older, perhaps simply existing as a natural feature of the deep. And its job was to make sure that the people who continued past this point were going for the right reasons, that they had thought about it carefully, that they were not heading down out of curiosity or pride or restlessness, but out of something more rooted than any of those. Finn thought about how to answer. He thought about the long evening at the kitchen table with old Thomas, about his grandfather walking up to the high moor on a cold November morning 62 years old with a small device in his pocket, about the creature waiting in the dark for 3,000 years, about Anya in her meadow, about Caleb in his room. about everything that had been quietly built and waited for and held in trust by people he had never met and people he had met. All of it now arriving at this small, cold alcove 3/4 of the way down to the center of the world. He understood that the only acceptable answer was the true one, and he understood more deeply that the true answer was not something he could speak in any language. It was something he had to send back to the presence the way the presence had sent its question, directly, completely, without the intermediary of words. He opened his heart. He let the presence look into him, with the particular vulnerability that real openness requires. He did not perform an answer. He did not try to be impressive. He simply let the presence see what was actually inside him. The love for his grandfather he was only just beginning to understand. The love for his brother beside him. The love for the unknown creature waiting in the chamber below. The simple wish to finish a thing that needed finishing. To bring light into a place that needed light. To not let an old man's quiet, patient love run out in the dark when it could be honored instead. Beside him, Caleb did the same. The amber gold of his held sunlight gentled slightly as he opened himself to the presence, the way a candle gentles when someone speaks softly near the flame. The presence considered them both for a long time. Finn could feel it doing so, not judging, considering, the way an elder considers a younger person who has come asking to be admitted to a serious thing. After what felt like minutes, but was probably less, the presence moved. It did not vanish. It simply drifted to one side of the alcove and settled against the wall, allowing the passage onward to be clear. As it moved past Finn, it brushed against the edge of his awareness one last time, and what it left behind was a single complete wordless thought. Pass through. Be careful. Honor him. They walked on. The passage continued to spiral downward. The light of Caleb's skin remained steady. They did not speak about what had just happened. There was no need to. The test had passed. The path was clear. They continued down toward the chamber at the heart of the world. About 50 meters before they reached it, Finn began to feel something he had not felt since his very earliest childhood, a particular quality of presence, the presence of his grandfather, faint but unmistakable. The way you sometimes catch the smell of a person who's been gone from a room long after they have left, the lingering trace of someone you love. He stopped walking for a moment and stood very still and breathed it in. Caleb stopped beside him and did the same. Caleb closed his eyes. "He is here," Caleb said quietly. "Yes," Finn said. "He is here." The device, Finn understood. The slowly fading device in his grandfather's coat pocket. The presence impression that had been comforting the trapped creature for 10 years and was now thinner than it had been, but was still emanating outward into the surrounding rock with the patient, steady warmth of a person whose love had outlived his body. They were close enough now to feel it, to meet him, after a fashion, for the first time in Finn's conscious memory. They walked the last 50 meters slowly. The passage leveled out. The walls drew back. And ahead of them, beyond a final low natural arch in the rock, the chamber at the heart of the world opened up, and what waited inside it, and the conversation Finn was about to have with a presence he had never met but had loved his whole life. That is what we will follow in the next episode, Explorers. Because some moments are too big to be rushed through, and this one needs the full attention it deserves. And that is a lesson at the center of this kid's adventure story for explorers, and it is one of the deepest lessons any of these stories has yet offered. There will be moments in your life when you are asked to finish something that someone you loved started, to carry something forward that they could not carry to the end themselves. It might be a project, a promise, a kindness, a piece of work, a relationship with someone they cared about. The temptation will be to think of it as a duty, as something you have to do. But the truth is much deeper than that. When you finish something that someone you love started, you are not just completing the thing. You are extending their love into a part of the world they could not reach themselves. You are letting them keep loving through you after they are gone. That is one of the most beautiful and most powerful things one human being can do for another. And it is available to all of us, all the time, in small ways and large. Carry forward what your loved one started. Honor their quiet labor by completing it. That is how love crosses generations. That is how it lasts. Hey, explorers! If you walked all the way down to the spiral passage and past the presence in the alcove with Finn and Caleb today, give this video the biggest thumbs up it has ever received. because you have absolutely earned every single moment of it. Our comment question today is the most important one we have asked yet. Has there ever been a project, promise, kindness, or piece of work that somebody you love started but could not finish? Have you finished it for them? Or do you hope to one day? Tell us about it in the comments below. Every single response will be read with care. Subscribe to Whoosh Tales right now and ring that notification bell so you never miss a single adventure story for kids. Because next week the brothers finally enter the chamber at the heart of the world. And what is waiting for them there, and the conversation that finally happens between Finn and a presence he has been carrying his entire life, will be the most important moment in everything we have built together over these 11 episodes. We will see you next week, explorers. Hush! That night, in a small natural alcove just beyond the chamber arch where they had decided to rest for a few hours before entering the chamber itself, Finn lay on his side on his folded jacket and watched Caleb sleeping nearby with his soft amber gold light dimmed to almost nothing. The deep geological pulse of the mountain beat slowly beneath them. The faint trace of their grandfather's presence in the surrounding rock was warm against their skin even in their sleep. Finn put his hand against the rock wall and felt it pulse back. We are nearly there, grandfather. He thought into the dark, into the rock, into the slow, patient love that had built every passage that had brought him to this place. We are nearly there. I will come and meet you properly tomorrow. And whatever you have been keeping company with for 10 years, we will be ready to take over from you, Caleb and I. You have done your part. We will do ours. He closed his eyes. He slept,